The road stretched endlessly, a ribbon of cracked asphalt winding between fields of brittle grass. The late autumn air was cruel, the kind that cut through fabric and bone alike, sharp with the smell of frost and exhaust fumes. A German shepherd lay crumpled on the roadside shoulder, his body little more than a fragile shadow of what it once had been. His ribs pressed starkly against his skin, each one like the bars of a cage. His paws were raw, scraped by gravel and weeks of wandering, and his coat, once thick and noble, hung in clumps, dulled by dust and neglect. He hadn't meant to collapse there. His body had given up long before his spirit wanted to. Days of hunger had weakened his stride, and nights of cold had sapped what little warmth he had left. At first, when the cars roared past, he tried to lift his head, tried to push himself upright, tail twitching with a desperate, fractured hope that one might stop, that one person might see him. But as the days blurred into one another, hope had become a heavy weight he could no longer carry. Now he lay still. The road hummed with indifference, the fields whispered with wind, and above him the sky dulled into the gray of early evening. Each breath he took rattled faintly, shallow, uncertain. He closed his eyes against the blur of passing headlights, too tired even to flinch anymore. Yet somewhere, in the back of his fading mind, a memory lingered. A hand brushing his fur, a voice calling his name, the sound of laughter that once meant belonging. He couldn't remember how long ago it had been, or why it had ended, but the ache of that absence weighed heavier than his hunger. Abandonment isn't a single wound, it's a silence that keeps echoing, louder and louder, until you can't hear anything else. The world carried on around him. Cars slowed at the curve, headlights sweeping across his body before speeding away again. A crow landed a few feet away, tilting its head at the motionless shape. Somewhere in the distance, a farm dog barked at nothing at all. Life moved, but for him, it was narrowing down to a thin thread, a single fragile choice between breath and surrender. The second night was the cruelest. Rain came without warning, a sudden curtain of cold water slashing against the earth. His body trembled violently, his fur heavy with damp. He tried once to drag himself beneath the small ditch by the road, but his legs gave out and he collapsed back into the mud. The rain pooled around him, soaking him to the skin, and for hours he lay there with his eyes half open, watching the blur of tires slice through the storm. Not one slowed, not one stopped. The road was a chorus of engines, and he was nothing more than another dark shape in the rain. But still he clung. Somehow, in the darkness of his pain, there remained the faintest ember of instinct, a whisper deep inside that refused to let go. It was not hope, not yet, but survival. Each shallow breath kept him tethered, as if the world might still hold one more chapter for him, though he didn't know why. By the third day the morning sun was cruelly bright, burning against his weary eyes. His body ached with thirst, his tongue was cracked and swollen. He no longer tried to move when the cars came. He had surrendered to the silence, to the slow fade of his heartbeat, when a sound unlike the others reached him. Footsteps. Not the thunder of wheels, not the cold rush of engines, but the steady rhythm of boots on gravel. Slow, approaching, hesitant. The German shepherd's ears twitched just barely. His eyelids fluttered open, and he saw, through a blur of haze, a shadow kneeling beside him. A man, middle-aged, wearing a worn coat, eyes wide with shock as he took in the broken body at his feet. The shepherd tried to lift his head, but the effort was too much. His muscles quivered, and he let it sink back against the earth. The man's breath caught in his throat. "Oh, God," he whispered, his voice low but raw. He reached a hand forward, but then hesitated, afraid the touch might be too much for such a fragile creature. But then, slowly, gently, his fingers brushed against the damp fur. The shepherd flinched faintly, a tremor passing through his ribs, but he didn't pull away. He didn't have the strength to. The man glanced at the road, cars hissing past, each one oblivious to the small scene unfolding in the dust. His jaw tightened. "How long have you been out here?" he murmured, more to himself than to the animal. His hand hovered again, then pressed against the shepherd's chest. Weak. The heartbeat was there, but faint, stuttering like a flame fighting against the wind. The dog's eyes opened, just enough to meet his. They were clouded, sunken, but behind them flickered something fragile and unbroken, a question, unspoken, almost too painful to carry. "Will you leave me, too?" The man felt it, as if the weight of that gaze passed directly into his chest. He swallowed hard. "Not this time," he whispered, though he knew the shepherd couldn't understand the words. For a moment, the world around them seemed to pause. The cars, the wind, the endless fields, all of it faded, and there was only the quiet bridge between one man and one dying animal, tethered together by something that felt both fragile and eternal. The shepherd's eyes drifted closed again, his body slackening, as though surrendering to the contact. The man's heart lurched. He pressed his hand harder against the dog's chest, feeling the faint rhythm falter. Panic rose in his throat. He urged, "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." The road had been silent for days, filled only with the indifference of strangers. But now, for the first time, someone had stopped. And in that fragile moment, as the man bent closer, lifting the shepherd's limp frame into his arms, the silence shattered into something new, the possibility of rescue. The shepherd's body felt heavier than stone in the man's arms. His breath came shallow and uneven, and every step toward the truck was an act of quiet desperation. Gravel crunched beneath hurried boots, the kind of sound that normally meant nothing but now seemed deafening against the silence of the dog's weak gasps. The man's coat was quickly soaked through by the wet fur pressed against his chest, the smell of rain and unwashed hair rising sharply with each stride. "Hold on," he muttered, his voice trembling as if words alone could anchor life to the fragile body he carried. "Just hold on a little longer." He laid the shepherd on the passenger seat, gently as if setting down glass that might crack under its own weight. For a moment he froze, staring at the way the dog's ribs rose and fell, uneven, faltering, too shallow. Then he slammed the door, ran around, and threw himself behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, and tires spun against gravel as he pulled back onto the road. The drive blurred into panic. Each glance at the shepherd was a knife, eyes closed, chest quivering, legs limp. The man's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as he muttered prayers he hadn't spoken in years. Rain pelted against the windshield, smearing the view of endless fields. At one point, the shepherd coughed weakly, a rasping sound that rattled like breaking glass. It jolted the man's heart into his throat. He reached across, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on damp fur, whispering, "Stay with me. I've got you now. Just stay." By the time the town's lights appeared on the horizon, his throat was raw from silence and whispered pleas. He swerved into the gravel lot of the small veterinary clinic, headlights slicing across the grass doors. He barely remembered putting the truck in park before he was out, arms scooping the shepherd back into his chest. The bell above the clinic door chimed loudly as he burst inside. "Help!" His voice cracked under the weight of fear. "Please, he's dying!" A receptionist looked up, startled, then immediately shouted toward the back. White coats appeared in motion, 2 techs and a vet rushing forward. They saw the shepherd's limp body and the urgency in the man's shaking hands, and suddenly the clinic erupted into controlled chaos. "Exam room 3, one of them barked. The man stumbled after them, his boots squeaking on the polished floor, the dog's fur dripping mud and rain onto the tiles. The table was cleared in an instant, and they gestured sharply, "Set him down, now." The man obeyed, his arms reluctant to release their burden, but he lowered the shepherd onto the cold steel. The dog whimpered faintly at the chill, and that sound sliced through every heart in the room. "Pulse is weak," a vet tech murmured, pressing fingers into the dog's neck. Another was already setting up an IV line, her hands quick but precise. "He's dehydrated, severe malnutrition, temps dropping fast." The veterinarian, a woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, leaned close. "We're losing time. Let's get fluids started. Push warm saline. Check oxygen saturation." The man hovered, trembling, as needles pierced fragile skin and tubes snaked across the table. The dog flinched once, a tiny tremor of protest, but didn't resist. His eyes fluttered half open, glazed with pain and exhaustion. The beeping of a heart monitor filled the room, a rhythm too slow, too fragile. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice cracking. Will he?" The vet didn't look up. "He's in critical condition, severe starvation. His organs may already be compromised. Tonight we'll decide if he makes it." The words slammed into him like a blow. He gripped the edge of the table, knuckles pale. "Do whatever it takes, please. Just don't let him go." For the next hour, the clinic became a battlefield. The shepherd's body trembled as fluids dripped into his veins. Heat lamps were wheeled in, casting a red glow over fur that still clung to the damp chill of the rain. An oxygen mask was gently fitted over his muzzle, mist fogging against the plastic. Every beep of the monitor was a countdown, slow, uneven, at times terrifyingly still. Once the line dipped so low that the room froze, the vet leaning in sharply, her voice calm but urgent. "Stay with me, boy. Come on, fight." The man's breath caught in his throat. He felt utterly powerless, standing inches away, yet unable to do anything but watch. He reached out, fingers brushing the shepherd's paw. It was cold, too cold, but he held it anyway, whispering, "Don't give up. Not yet. Not when you've been found." Hours blurred. IV bags changed. Monitors beeped in fragile rhythms. The dog coughed, his body convulsing weakly, and for a terrifying moment the beep slowed into silence. The vet shouted an order, "Increase oxygen!" and the team moved like lightning. The man's vision blurred with tears as he leaned close, whispering through a voice that shook, "You don't get to leave yet. Do you hear me? Not yet." Then, against all odds, the line rose again, slow, uneven, but there. The beeping returned, a collective breath released in the room, as though everyone had been holding it at once. The vet finally stepped back, sweat glistening on her brow. Her voice was quieter now, but steady. "He's stable, for the moment. But the next 12 hours are critical.
His body's been pushed beyond its limits. Starvation like this, it shuts organs down one by one. If he makes it to morning, his chances improve. The man nodded, his chest heaving, but his hand never left the shepherd's paw. He couldn't look away from the frail rise and fall of ribs, the thin thread of life stretched taut between staying and slipping away. The room grew quieter. The chaos slowed to vigilance. The man sat in the hard plastic chair beside the table, refusing to leave. He watched the shallow breaths, the fog of oxygen, the way the dog's ears twitched faintly as though still listening to the road outside. And in that silence, the weight of everything pressed down on him. He thought of all the cars that had passed by, of the rain, the cold, the indifference of a world too busy to stop. He thought of how close this life had come to fading alone in the mud. His throat tightened. "Not anymore," he whispered, so quietly only the dog could hear. "You'll never be alone again." The shepherd stirred faintly at the sound, eyes opening a crack, clouded, weak, but alive. They met his for the briefest heartbeat, and in that flicker of recognition, that fragile moment of connection, hope broke through the heaviness of the night. But as the vet had warned, morning was still far away.